Welcome to the Bronx Music Heritage Center's Music by the Book program, our July edition. Thank you for joining in with us today. Before we start our program, this is a program we started doing monthly where we interview authors of new books about music in the Bronx, and we get to talk to them and present their new book. Tonight we have a great a book that's just been a re-edition of a book that's been out there, and we're really excited to talk to the author. Before we get into that, though, I want to give a shout out to our funders. The Bronx Music Heritage Center programming is supported in part by the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the New York State Legislature, public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, the Lily Auchincloss Foundation, the Howard Gilman Foundation, and the Laurie M. Tisch Illumination Fund. And today, for our Music by the Book program, we're going to interview and talk to Joe Conzo Jr. about the book Born in the Bronx, which actually came out a while ago, but just in this past year has been reeditioned with some new information, a new forward, and he'll talk a bit about what the new edition encompasses. And Joe is a member of our Bronx Music Heritage Center Advisory Board, but he's also a photographer from the Bronx, literally born in the Bronx, as his book says. He started to learn about photography at the Agnes Russell School at Columbia University as a youth. Then he went to the School of Visual Arts. He comes from a family with a long history of community activism. Um, you know, Evelina Antonetti, Lorraine Montenegro, Elba Cabrera, the list goes on with his family, the work that they've done in the Bronx and for the Puerto Rican community. Joe himself was an EMT, or I guess it's an EMS,
EMT.
EMT, or EMS, and he later became the leader of the EMT union. And he also is a member of the Nuyorican Bronx Photo Collective, the Seis do Sur. So we are so glad to welcome Joe Conzo Jr. to tonight's program. But before he comes on, we're going to have a few words from Bobby Sanabria, the other artistic director, who many of you know, the great jazz, salsa musician, educator. He is going to start off the program for us. Bobby Sanabria.
All right,
Oh,
ladies
wait,
and
can
gentlemen.
I say one more thing? I'm sorry, Bobby. I'm so sorry.
Whoa! I just
Everyone, I'm
got.
sorry. Everyone watching on Facebook, Joe and Bobby, everyone will be taking questions through Facebook. So put your questions in the Facebook thread, and we'll answer them. Joe, you can get it. You can ask Joe questions live, and we'll answer them on the program.
Anything you want.
Yeah, now that I got hit with a wet towel in the face,
Right.
as Osvaldo Lasalle says, "Saludos, amigos." All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bobby Sanabria. I am the co-artistic director, along with Elena Martinez, of the Bronx Music Hall, Bronx Music Heritage Center. Welcome to our Music by the Book event. This evening, we're going to be talking to the person that you see on the screen right now, the one and only Joe Conzo Jr. Elena Martinez gave a little bit of background information about him, but we're going to be talking about this incredible book, Born in the Bronx, a visual record of the early days of hip hop. It was originally published in 2007, and now it's just been recently republished, okay, in an expanded edition with more pictures, more information, more great stuff. It is the job of artists like Joe Conzo Jr. to document history, but to do it in an artistic way like he has done, well, he's never been equal. There are other photographers that are very well known, Henry Chalfant, Martha Cooper, but Joe was at ground zero at the beginning of this incredible genre of music that was born, make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, in the borough of music, particularly in a region known of that borough as the South Bronx. I'm going to read something by a relative of Joe Conzo Jr., the great educator, civil rights activist, advocate for Puerto Rican independence, and founder of United Bronx Parents, that she wrote in 1980, the late great Evelina Lopez Antonetti. She said, "We will never stop struggling here in the Bronx. Even though they've destroyed it around us, we would pitch tents if we have to rather than move from here. We would fight back. There is nothing we would not do. They will never take us away from here. I feel very much a part of this, and I'm never going to leave. And after me, my children will be here to carry on. I have very strong strong children, and very strong grandchildren." And one of them is the great Joe Conso Jr. that we have here. Joseph, thank you so much for spending this evening with us. You're very busy. You've been traveling the world promoting the relaunch, the new edition of this book. Before we get into it, we know a little bit of from what Elena said about your beginnings in photography, but really, you started at a very young age. What age did you really start becoming a shooter or a clicker, as they say? What
as
college?
long as as long as you don't call me a paparazzi, I'm fine.
Right.
Um, First, I want to say thank you to you, Bobby, and Elena, and the Bronx Music Character Center, and everybody involved in that beautiful space that is doing such wonderful things in the Bronx for the people of the Bronx for so many years. Um, I have a report card from 1972 saying that Joey is excelling in photography. So that would have made me about 9, 10 years old.
Wow. Do you remember the
So
camera that you had at the time? What kind of
I
camera?
listen, at that time it was the little Minolta point and shoot, click and wind, probably a 110 camera, but film.
Mhm.
Digital photography wasn't even around back then. So yeah, fond memories. I have to give credit where credit is due to my stepfather at the time, Michael Caine, who was a avid family photographer who gave me the photo bug and gave me the desire to take pictures. And it was just became a love and passion of mine that started at a very early age. And having the support of my parents, it blossomed into a passion that has grown for almost 50, 50 plus years.
Wow, that's
And
amazing, amazing. So your
and
catalog of photography must be so ridiculous. I mean, because I know you, I know you and several other photographers that are part of this incredible collective that we'll talk about in a little while. The Seis del Sur, 6 New Yorican photographers. I mean, just you alone, you must have. I mean, thousands upon thousands of
I
pictures.
mean, I'm known, Bobby, for my hip hop photography, and I'm grateful for that. I really am. But my archives stretch out across the spectrum so much. When I wasn't hanging out with my hip hop brothers and sisters growing up, I was hanging on my dad's coattail, Joe Conzo Jr., who is notably, one of the foremost historians on Latin music, who was Tito Puente's closest confidant for 40 plus years. And my archives is made up of, besides hip hop, Latin music. I have phenomenal pictures of Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, the Palmieri brothers, Ray Barretto, the list goes on. And
Yes,
then,
indeed. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
when I wasn't with my dad, I was getting dragged off to demonstrations out in Washington, D.C. or at City Hall because of my grandmother, the late, great Hell Lady of the Bronx, Dr. Evelina Antonetti, shooting demonstrations in just urban landscapes at the time. So I have a large body of work that people can go to the Cornell University website and look at the Cornell Hip Hop collection and view close to 10,000 of my images of hip hop, Latin music, urban documentary photography, and family photos.
Incredible. I mean, so you start off as a young boy in public school learning photography. You're learning it from the ground up. You come up during the tail end of the age of having to learn how to develop film in a dark room, etc. Do you remember what the very first picture was that you took? And do you still have it?
I still have it. I still have those negatives. A lot of them, most of my negatives are deposited. 10,000 of my negatives are deposited at Cornell University. They sit on the same shelf as the Gettysburg Address, which is, if I can curse, so fucking cool. You know what I mean? And Cornell's done such a phenomenal job in housing and preserving my work. And and making it accessible to the world in a digital format where people can do research. It, you know, I was that chubby little kid, if you see in the background behind me, and was quiet and you know, needed that icebreaker, and my camera was the icebreaker. And I became one of the most popular kids in the neighborhood because I was the only one taking pictures. And it was a time where, you know, you had one roll of film, which had 36 exposures on it, and you had to make that roll of film last. Unlike today with digital cameras, you can take 1,000 pictures in one night.
Right.
So
Right.
I learned the craft of photography at a very young age, which is, you know, I'm a firm advocate. If you love something so much, you know the history and the fundamentals of it. And you as a teacher know that also in music. So, you know, I came up in an era where I learned about great photographers growing up. I learned the fundamentals of developing film. My mother allowed me to build a darkroom in one of the spare bathrooms that we had in the Michelangelo apartment. So I had a darkroom that I
Wow.
used to spend hours and hours in there, and the rest is history. The
Right.
rest is history.
But do you actually remember what the first subject was? The first actual picture? Did you take a still life, or did you take
Listen, it was probably a picture. You know, I'm the oldest out of 5 brothers and sisters, and it was probably a picture of one of my brothers and sisters.
Wow.
Grabbed them, you know, by the shoulder. Sit here. Let me take a picture. You know, but you know, you test the waters. You go from taking pictures of people's to surroundings to events to, you know, photography is a very broad medium. There's so many different avenues in photography one can go into: fashion, portrait, industrial, documentary. You know, I touched a little bit of all of that.
Right. What's the first musical group that you took a picture of? Was it a hip hop group, a salsa group, or what was it? A rapper? What is it?
I would probably have to say it was probably Latin music, Tito, hanging out with my dad,
Tito Puente, yeah.
Tito
Ma-
Puente.
Maestro Puente. Wow. I mean, I'm trying to remember when we first met, but I guess I met you on the scene at a concert or whatever. Uh, Joe, I've been honored that Joe has occasionally taken
I've
pictures
shot
of
you
me.
over the
Yeah,
years too,
yeah,
Bobby.
yeah. So I mean, I'm just very fortunate that you've documented me and so many other.
I've even shot your CD cover,
That's right.
which is pretty dope.
Yeah, we
And that's a great story too.
yeah, maybe later on Elena can pull it up. We Joe did the I asked Joe to do the cover for one of our Grammy nominated albums, Big Band Urban Folktales. Maybe Elena could pull it up later from the internet and we could display it and I'll tell the whole story about it. Why I'm smiling the way I'm smiling. It is a funny story. But I wanted to uh so you have this life where you were documenting the salsa world, which is basically Cuban music the way we Puerto Ricans play it here in New York City. And you're documenting it in a big way because you have access to the greatest Latin musician that has ever lived, Tito Puente, through your father, Joe Conzo Jr., who was his publicist, his biographer. Uh, I mean, and then from there, you also have access to all the other great Latin musicians that were around at that time. Period. Many of them have passed on, and so you have one foot in the world of salsa photography. How did the hip hop photography start? Like, were you involved
So
in hip hop in any sense, like as a dancer, a rapper, a
no,
DJ, anything?
no, no, no. So my introduction to what we call hip hop today, which it wasn't called hip hop back then. Um, I had went to school with two of the pioneers of the culture, and that's DJ Tony Tone and MC Easy AD. which formed a group called the Cold Crush Brothers. Now, this is 1978, 79, at the height of disco. I mean, disco ruled the airwaves, you know, and, you know, on one end of the radio, you had, you know, you could find Latin music being played also in R&B, but disco ruled the airwaves. And I was invited one night by my schoolmates to go to this club called the T Connection up here in the North Bronx to photograph this group that they were putting together, the Cold Crush Brothers. And on that night, you know, I got to photograph my classmates and, you know, other guys, and this Puerto Rican DJ named Charlie Chase playing music that my parents played in the living room while growing up, but playing music in a way that I had never heard played before. You know, again, you know, a whole song would be played out, but Charlie would take different parts of different songs and extend them, as we call, you know, breakbeats today. And I was just, as I tell the story, kidnapped into this culture that we call hip hop.
So that was back then. That was your very first exposure to hip hop, or you knew about it?
One of the first exposures. I mean, during that time, you can go to any park and see these DJs make these makeshift, you know, events, pop-up events, and play music.
Right.
But that was the first controlled jam that I went to, so to speak. And I was fortunate enough to you know, document the birth of this billion-dollar industry we call hip hop today. And you know, when I speak hip hop, I speak of the culture of hip hop. Music is just one aspect of this culture. When I say the word hip hop, you know, there's other elements. There's the dancing part, the b-boying. There's the DJing part, there's the MC part, there's the graffiti part.
Right.
You know, so those all elements make up the culture of hip hop. That when I use the word hip hop, that's what I'm referring to.
At the time that you were witnessing this, did you say to yourself, man, this is something historic, or were you just in the moment, viscerally experiencing?
It was in the moment for me. It was just in a moment that I gravitated to and just started, you know, shooting, for lack of better words, these events that the Cold Crush Brothers were a part of. And through them, I got to meet other pioneering musical groups like the Treacherous Three, Africa Bambaataa, Kool Herc, the Fearless Four, you name it. All these pioneering, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, all these pioneering hip-hop groups that were laying the foundation at that time, I got to photograph and meet through the Cold Crush Brothers.
Now, the so-called Zulu Nation, when you went to this first hip-hop event, were they already this extended kind of hip-hop family with all the elements put together, and this, for lack of a better term, club or membership or society?
Well, the Zulu Nations were formed way before my introduction to the culture of hip hop.
That's what I meant. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. So you know, growing up as a kid, you heard about the Zulu Nation, other gangs, so to, for lack of, you know, better words, and they pretty much dominated the Bronx River Projects. You know, so you know, I knew of the Zulu Nation and what they stood for, and some of their history, and would later on become friends with, you know, the founder, Africa Bambaataa, and a lot of other people. But, you know, it was, again, through the Cold Crush Brothers that I got my introduction to the Zulu Nation and got to meet so many of these pioneering people in the music part of the culture.
And can you explain to our viewers, for some of them who may not know, what is the Zulu Nation?
Zulu Nation is an offshoot of a street gang that started back in the early 70s. And it was started by Africa Bambaataa, who had the foresight, with some other gang members at the time, Yellow Benji from, you know, Ghetto Brothers, to stop gang violence. and Zulu Nation was formed to advocate and promote love, peace, and knowledge, and having fun. So, Bambaataa is known for that, and it just spread. They were huge group of young kids, brown and black, and of all denominations, promoting this culture of peace, of knowledge, and friendship, and not killing each other at that time.
Right, fantastic. Well, let's turn now to some of your incredible photographic work. Elena Martinez is going to speak to us and to you, and she's going to queue up something right now, and we'd like to get some of your commentary about whatever she puts up on the screen right now.
Well, so Joe, I'm gonna put up oh shoot, am I muted?
Yes, you're muted.
Okay, Joe, so I'm going to put up some images that I chose. They're just from your book. I know you have a lot of other photos. As you mentioned, you have a lot of Latin music photos, the streets of the Bronx, protests, things like that. I just picked ones that were from the book to talk about, to talk about a few things about that era. And also, I think it's really, it comes at a really good time. I don't know if anyone's watching right now, but on PBS, there's this like 5-part series on PBS right now. It started a couple weeks ago about rock photography, rock and hip hop photography. It started
Phenomenal.
Well,
It's called Icons, and it was done last year.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's a phenomenal series.
Are you going to be in it? There's still some more episodes. Are you going to be in it? Okay. Well, the only thing
No hable inglés. Okay.
Okay, well, I hope. Well, hopefully, we'll see. This is maybe a prelude, because one of the things I think it's great. I love that's the music. I love classic rock. They had stories about Baron Wallman, like these incredible photographers who were sort of like the pioneers in that. But I do think that they're not going into enough depth for me about what makes a photo iconic, and I just think they're not getting into like what are some of the iconic photos, and what makes it iconic. So I chose some from yours. Okay, Joe, did you want to say something about that, or?
So I was part of the conversation on social media the other day. It's like, is photography fine art? What makes a photograph iconic or fine art? And I kept it plain and simple. If it spurs emotions in somebody, it makes it iconic. Period. End of story. I can take, to put this book together, when it first came out in 2007, and shout out to Johan Kugelberg, who befriended me through, who I met through Grandmaster Kaz, who had the foresight and vision to put this book together. This is not a photography book. This is a hip hop book. This book has a lot of photography in it, but it's a book that has ephemera. It has firsthand words from the pioneers, like Popmaster Fable, Disco Wiz, Grandmaster Kaz, LA Sunshine, so many iconic people. And it first was print, there was an edition of 10,000 was done in 2007. And that went, and Johan and I traveled the world. I still travel the world because of this book, and I'm grateful for that. But, what makes a photograph iconic? It's all of the person that's looking at it. And I've always tried to take pictures to bring somebody into a moment and tell a story. Everybody's a photographer today, and shout out to, everybody that uses an iPhone and all of that. But, it's more than that. It's more than that. And if I can spur emotions in somebody in my photographs, I've pretty much accomplished and document a time and period. I've pretty much done what I set out to do.
And that's something they bring up in the series about it's the viewer creates what's iconic. But there are also images that people see that everyone knows, that even if you're not maybe a fan, there's certain images of Jimi Hendrix or whoever that people look at. Everyone knows that image because there's something about it that just that everyone reacts to, not just a few people. And so
well, that famous image, I think everybody can relate to, that famous image of John Lennon wearing the New York shirt.
Mhm.
That was one shot out of 5 pictures. Why did that one shot out of those 5 pictures that day become one of the most iconic shots of John Lennon's career and the photographer's career? It just said so much in one single shot.
Well, I'm going to show you some of your photos. We're going to look at some of your photos, and please forgive me, everyone watching this. I had a little technology problem. I lost my original PowerPoint I put together, so this is sort of like thrown together. But so they're not going to look as nice as they do in Joe's book or anywhere else. But these are hopefully some images Joe can talk about. So let me see. Let me just get that on screen. And okay, hold on. Okay, everyone can see that? Okay, so
Yes.
This image I picked out for a couple of reasons. This is, I think, truly iconic because this is an image that a lot of people who are interested in hip hop know this image. This is Tony Tone and Herc. And actually, I guess we're going to see a lot of Cold Crush photos that I go through because there's a lot of Cold Crush images that you have. You mentioned, you knew those guys early. But there's just something about this image, the way they're dressed. It's about attitude, the way they hold themselves. It's Cool Herc and Tony Tone. And this is in 1979 at T Connection. Can you talk a little bit about this? Do you think does it capture anything about attitude or anything of that era?
It catches the whole moment. It catches the fashion of the time, the turtleneck, t-shirt that Tony Tone is wearing with his cap turned to the side, Herc in his denim jacket over a sheepskin jacket, and his fedora hat with his glasses. And this is one of the first times, if not the first time, that I met DJ Kool Herc, who was bigger than life back then, because you heard so much about him. And Tony Tone, my schoolmate at South Bronx High School, introduced me to him and said, take a picture. And so I'm going to use the word iconic. This is one of my iconic photos that I have that everybody's interested in because it sparks that sensitivity, that, wow, this picture says so much. A little side note on this, Herc hates this picture because his tongue is sticking out.
Oh.
But this picture has been referenced and used in so many documentaries and in magazines and in books because it's one of the earliest images of this mythical giant or this giant of the culture, DJ Kool Herc.
I think it's just like he looks cool too. I mean, he just kind of looks cool in it too. So I guess that's sort of like why I don't know if that's why people relate to it as well. But just to go back to the next photo, oh, okay.
Well, for me, what's it captures kind of like the transition. You see Tony Tone with the hat, with the baseball cap turned to the side. That was a common thing back in the 1930s and 40s with little kids in New York City. But so there's like a tie to the past. And then you have the way they're standing is now the iconic hip hop
B-boy stance. Yeah.
B-boy stance, which it's been adopted by everyone all over the world, but it's a Bronx thing, I mean, people.
Yeah, I mean, there's a famous photograph of Mussolini during one of his speeches, crossing his hands, taking a b-boy stance. So
it radiates some attitude. It radiates some sort of attitude. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then Kool Herc with the fedora. That's also a throwback to the past, but done in a adapted in a new kind of a way.
Well, I'm gonna get back to that in some of the photos because you guys in that era did a lot with hats. You guys did a lot of funky things with hats, which I'll get to. I think I have some photos here. Sorry about this. Is right from the book. This is another one. So this is Kool Moody and Kaz, Grandmaster Kaz from the Cold Crush Brothers, 1981 in Harlem World. Again,
another one of my iconic photos. It shows two of the GOATs, greatest of all times, MCs, you know, letting me take their picture. And Kumo D, who is a phenomenal MC, phenomenal writer, lyricalist, and he'll tell people that Joe's the only one that's taking pictures of him without his glasses, because he's known for wearing these huge glasses. And Kaz, who is my dearest and closest friend of the Cold Crush Brothers, who's still prominent today, is just the corduroy pants, the leather bomber, the fedora hat, the name buckle on Mo D, his initials, MD, the leather gloves. We're inside a club, and it's about fashion.
Well,
We're not coat checking none of our coats. You know what I mean? It's about looking good, and that's part of the hip hop culture, is the fashion.
yeah, and that I think comes out through a lot of these photos, like what people wore of that era, what was in fashion at that time. These I picked out. Okay, again, you have like you have
Just real quick, Elena, if you could go back to that picture real quick.
mhm.
Now check out, everybody, the bomber jackets. People,
Leather.
yeah. People would use what was available at the time and make it fly.
But that being said, in a lot of these images, I mean, I guess maybe it's winter time in some of these photos, and like you said, there's no coat check. But everyone seemed to wear like winter hats and winter coats on stage a lot. Was that something, a fashion thing, or just because there was no coat check?
Again, I mean, there was coat check, but you're not going to check in your coat because you got to look fly. And that was the persona that we gave off when we went out on a Friday night, Saturday night, whether it's to perform or watch other groups. Right? You got to look good, and Kaz is wearing corduroy pants. Modi's probably wearing Sergio Valente jeans, but you got the turtleneck, you got the leather gloves, you got the fedora, and you got to look fly. You have to look fly.
So I think these photos then also capture, like you said, it's not just about the music. You have the musicians, the performers, but you're also catching a moment in time and fashion of that era and what people, what looked good in the aesthetics of that era, which I think is important.
And again, I had no intentions. Well, I had intentions. Those were my dreams and aspect, to become a famous photographer and travel the world and stuff. But, this to me is just a shot of two of my friends. But to you and everybody else, it's an iconic shot because it means so much. That's why it was so hard to do this book, because, what might seem like a simple picture for me is iconic to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And that's why I try and remove myself, especially from exhibitions, because, it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's hard curating your own work, so to speak.
Yeah, because you have a different expectation too from the audience.
Yeah. So the color shot on my left is actually a Polaroid picture that we used in the book. And again, pioneering DJs, DJ Kool Herc, DJ Tony Tone, and DJ Breakout. DJ Breakout from the Funky 4+1. These are young teenagers who became the foundation bricklayers of this culture we call hip hop. And this was at
T Connection. I think it was labeled the T Connection, 1978.
Probably T Connection or someplace else. That might be a typo. But again, it's just a moment in time. It's about attitude. It's about Herc's wearing tan Pro Keds, Tony and his Pumas, and again it's all about attitude and how you present yourself. The black and white photo.
That's not yours though, right? That's in the book. It's in the book, but isn't that Angelo King?
Yeah, that's Tony Tone, aka Angelo King, and it's an actual Polaroid that I have. Oh. So the black and white photos of the Cold Crush Brothers, that was shot across the street from United Bronx Parents on Prospect and 156th Street in front of PS 130. and we just spent the day out there taking pictures. And you know, again, those are some of my most iconic shots, hanging out with the Cold Crush when they weren't performing.
And one of the other reasons I picked this out too, again, you have the poses, the attitude, right? That comes through from that era, but also like a lot of sneakers and a lot of different kinds of brands of sneakers, because sneakers are like hip hop sort of. You
Well,
know,
yeah,
there's
I
this big thing
mean,
about sneakers and kicks, right? In hip
everybody
hop.
knows the story about, you know, my Adidas and stuff, but you know, you have Kaz. I think he's wearing Pony sneakers there, and Tony's wearing Adidas, and JDL's wearing Bobby. What's the name of those shoes he's wearing?
Playboys.
Not Playboys. I
Which
mean,
you're talking about on the
he's on his knee. Yeah. Suede.
Those suede. They call them. What do they call them? Sand dune shoes. Or
Something
sand
like that.
dune
Yeah.
boots. Yeah.
But you know, it's the attitude. It's the attitude. The bicycles in the shot. You know, it's the hats and the bucket hats, and you know, we just had a great day that day, shooting all these pictures.
So let me go to the next. Oops. This one. Now I chose this one because this is an unidentified dancer. But when we talk about iconic, this I think is a very iconic photo because many people, even if they don't know anything about hip hop, will probably have seen this, whether like for a, you know, in a promotional thing or something. And so, so I wanted to ask you though, like this image has become iconic in a way. He's not famous. It's just this dancer you were getting at a club, but and I think the dancer is Roseland Ballroom, 1982. It says, "What when you think of something, are there other things that can make something iconic? Is it the composition or the lighting? Do you take that into account?"
It's everything. You know, a good photographer will compose his shot before he takes the shot. You know, a good photographer will see a shot before he takes it. And you have to remember, you know, again, these shots were done on film where you took the picture and didn't know your results until you got home that day or the next day and developed a little film. So you had to know your shutter speed, your film sensitivity, your aperture, and you know, I can go on and on and on. But you know, actually this shot, and people really bug out when I tell the story, this shot was a mistake. My flash didn't go off.
Wow.
I hated it. I have a series of this b-boy dancing in a cypher at Roseland Ballroom downtown on 50-something Street. Bobby, where's Roseland at? Or where's Roseland used to be? 3,000 people, and the Cold Crush were performing that night. But a cypher, which is a circle that, you know, the b-boys and b-girls battle in, opened up, and I'm taking pictures of this guy popping, which is a form of dancing. And I have a series where my flash goes off, and in some of the pictures, the flash didn't go off. So when I originally developed this roll of film and saw this image, I was upset. Years later, you reevaluate your archives and you go, coño, that's a dope ass shot. It's a silhouette shot, and it's just a phenomenal shot. And I've asked who's who in the b-boy, b-girl world, dancing world, and we don't know who this guy is. But it's one of my most iconic shots. It's called the Popper, and you know, it was a mistake.
Well, what's great about it is it gives it that kind of spiritual, heavenly quality, the way the light hits them from above.
If you want to look at it that way, Bobby, yeah, you can.
Anyway, the Roseland Ballroom was on West 52nd Street.
There you go.
Right where the Musicians Union was at the original location, and it was a very famous ballroom.
It was huge.
Goes back to the swing era, the 1930s, and it made the transitions into rock and roll, funk, R&B, etc., and then finally hip hop. And it was an amazing place and part of New York history that's lost to the dust of time. But we're glad that you documented it.
Yeah. Again, Go ahead, Elena.
No, I'm just gonna say this one. You have Tony Tone there with the boom, and I chose it because the boom. I know a lot of people probably know this image of yours, but it's also sort of like the tracksuit in the boom box, or sort of other sort of like the aesthetics of that era and the part of that era, the things that we think of that time.
Well, again, these are the two school classmates that I love dearly, and two of my brothers, Easy AD and Tony Tone with the boombox, who pretty much I give credit to in inviting me to take pictures of them, and that opened up the doors to my hip hop photography. But this shot was an impromptu photo shoot where I lived at Michelangelo Apartments across the street from Lincoln Hospital, and I used to do these impromptu photo shoots with the Cold Crush and the Treacherous Three and all these groups. In Michelangelo, we used to break into the community center because it was big enough for me to set up lights or whatever, because I didn't have the space in where I lived at. And this is from one of the shots. We had a mic that's not connected to anything, and that was my beautiful Sanyo boombox that I brought down. And this is a series of shots, just hanging out with my friends that we use.
And that's an early boombox because, as everybody knows, they got much bigger.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Much bigger. And in terms of the whole culture of the track suits and all that, people talk about skinny jeans today, et cetera, et cetera. Those were being rocked back then, and they facilitated people dancing, break dancing.
Yeah, but it's not only the tracksuit; it's also, if you notice up on his chest, CC, that stands for Cold Crush, and on the other, it's making it yours.
Right. They were.
So back then, you would go to, I guess, I don't know, what did they call the 99-cent stores back then? John's Bargain Store, and buy a sheet of iron-on letters, and make and iron on letters on your jacket or T-shirt to proclaim who you were down with at the time.
Right.
But that's really interesting too. There's sort of like DIY culture too, which I'm going to show some. I'm going to show some flyers later, and that's part of that too. These like hand-drawn flyers, which were amazing. This like amazing treasury of them that you also have some of them in the book as well. So that's part of that. This is the Cold Crush at Negril, I think, in 1981. Again, I just wanted to bring out Kaz is wearing that sort of like almost military-looking jacket, I guess, and all the different hats. So again, just as sort of like the fashion of that era. Did you have any?
So real quickly, Club Negrils was a Jamaican club downtown. It was run by Michael Hallman and Cool Lady Blue. I think they had one or two nights down there. And Cool Lady Blue, who is British, who managed the Rocksteady crew at one time and did a hip hop night along with Michael Hallman down at this Club Negril, are instrumental in bringing hip hop downtown. And this is one of the nights, if you look at these images in whole, the crowd is 99% Caucasian, watching the Cold Crush with Charlie Chase and Tony Tone perform. And that night, I think you had the Shack crew, another b-boy crew perform also, and Charlie Ahern was there that night, and it was just one of those magical nights downtown.
What's really interesting too, you said, Michael Holman, I think that there's an exhibit at the Museum of the City of New York about the music of 1980, 1984, and there he's in that, and Joe, some of your images are in that as well. Yes. You're sort of like, your work is everywhere right now. But I think what's even to me more interesting about that exhibit, not that time frame or that chronology, but is the fact that it was all the places where uptown met downtown. And I think, like you said, that where the uptown, the Bronx communities met the white Lower East Side and Manhattan communities. I think that was like a really interesting part of that exhibit. I think those places, and I guess Negril, like you said, was one of those places.
Yeah, Charlie Chase DJing in the back.
The back, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen the exhibition yet, but I've been privy to in helping contribute to it, and I've heard nothing but great reviews. And Sean over at the Museum of the City of New York has done a phenomenal job collecting images from every spectrum of music, so to speak. I mean, Joe Batan's in there. You know
Fort
what I mean?
Apache, Fort Apache,
Fort
Andy and Jerry
Apache,
Gonzalez.
Andy, and Jerry Gonzalez. You know, some of my Latin images are in there, and you know, again, shout out to Michael Holman and what he's done with. You know, Michael Holman is an unsung hero of the culture. He's credited with doing the first TV pilot series, Graffiti Rock.
Yep. Yep.
You know, which is so instrumental in the history of the culture.
So just to get back to the tracksuit, we talked about tracksuit. Here's Kaz with a great tracksuit on. So I just wanted to show that you guys talked a little bit about why tracksuits were a big part of the fashion in that era.
Again, the Cold Crush, you know, they were my family. You know, they used to come over. Moms used to cook for them and stuff, and you know, this is again at Michelangelo's and just hanging out, taking pictures.
So this one, sorry it's a little cut off. This one is great because it's the Cold Crush Brothers at Harlem World in 1981. There's a famous battle, I guess, against the Fantastic Romantic Five that they're going to be doing that night. But I think what I wanted to ask you about, I mean, they're this sort of dress up as sort of like the gangsters. Does that sort of like, you know, it's sort of like influenced by maybe like what Willie Colon and Hector Lavoe were doing in the early days of their early albums of salsa had all those like sort of gangster imagery on them. Were they influenced by that?
It probably was, and you know, Charlie Chase could probably clarify more on that, or Tony Tone, but it just gives credit to this group, the Cold Crush Brothers, that they were more than just a rap group at the time, musical group. You know, they went all out to put on costumes, so to speak, and perform. You know, I remember, you know, they had the foresight to use smoke machines on stages, you know, and gimmicks, so to speak. You know, and this night is when they battled the Fantastic Romantic Five, Grand Wizard Theodore's group, at Harlem World. It was one of the biggest rap battles at the time. There had been a handful prior to this one, but this was recorded on wax and put out by Charlie Chase, and it's still debated today on who won. But you know, they came out as gangsters. You know, those are water pistols and stuff. But I mean, to have the foresight to dress up as gangsters to perform is just, you know, you look at some of the musical hip hop groups today, they just walk back and forth on the stage and just, you know, blurt out rhymes. You know, here we are, teenagers who probably don't have a pot to piss in, but yet scrounged up enough money to buy the same suits and coordinate and dance, dress the same to perform.
Did Theodore and his group, were they dressed up for their set too? That night?
If I remember correctly, no. I mean, they were dressed to the nines, but they weren't as coordinated as the Cold Crush Brothers.
So you have a sense of theater as well.
Of course.
They had that foresight. You know,
of course.
So this is Cold Crush Brothers 1982 in leather, and for the punk rock rap and photo shoot. And the reason I thought it was interesting too, I mean, it's a famous photo. A lot of people have seen this photo before, but also it's sort of like, you know, Kaz, or sort of like, you know, Bambaataa had some of that, you know, look with the glasses and stuff. And also there's the famous image of Grandmaster, Flash, and then
Flash and the Furious Five.
They wear leather and stuff. So what was the era? All of a sudden, all those guys were wearing leather.
This is what happens when you mix uptown and downtown. This is the result when the Bronx comes downtown. This is the result. So, you know, rap music at the time was going through a little transition, or just being influenced by the punk rock scene at that time. You know, the Cold Crush Brothers recorded a song called Punk Rock Rap. And, you know, it was just the thing that was going on at the time. You know, hip hop, the music aspect of it can, you know, you can reference, you know, country music, rock music, punk music, you know, everything. We borrow a little bit of everything from every genre of music. You got to understand something. You know, growing up in New York City, I think before FM, you know, we all listened to Cousin Brucey on WABC radio. And, you know, Kaz wrote some of his most famous lyrics to writers and composers like Gilbert O'Sullivan, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, but that's what influenced him as a writer, writing up some of the most famous, Cold Crush lyrics at the time. So, like Kaz says, hip hop didn't invent anything; it reinvented everything. And it's one of the.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
It's. I think it is the youngest out of all the genres of music, but it is the biggest.
Yeah, global now. It's definitely a global. It's definitely went global.
It has surpassed every genre of music, and it's the youngest out of all the genres of music.
One of the great things about these photos document too is that these were organized groups. They were obviously they used the nom de plume crews, but most of the time now you see rappers just as solo artists. But these were organized groups, and everybody had a function in the group.
Oh yeah, we all had a function. I took pictures. They had the foresight to bring me along and document their shows when no other group was doing it. They had the foresight to take my images and put them on flyers, which no other group was doing at the time. So, these guys saw the future. And, I'm just grateful to have become part of the family, so to speak, and document some of the earliest days of this culture we call hip hop.
So you would say Cold Crush Brothers are sort of like innovative in that way, that they were thinking about performance and costumes and flyers and publicity and everything.
Everything. We had security. We had people recording the shows. Tape master would record the shows on his double cassette and, preserve that. We, drivers. I mean, it was an organized group at the time.
So one of the pictures, which I don't have in here, I'm mad, it was one of the ones I lost in the transition here. I did have the Cold Crush at the Dixie Club because maybe, even though I don't have an image of it, because like I said, I was having a little trouble here at my PowerPoint. The Dixie Club was another club. It was actually a different name club, but it was in the Bronx, in Morrisania area, and it was a part of the Charlie Ahearn's film.
Wild
Styles. So can you talk a little bit about that, like that photo shoot? Were you sort of like Wild Style came out in 1983. It's sort of like the first feature film to sort of document this culture, right? That was, on the streets, hip hop. It was, I don't know if it was when it became called hip hop itself, but how did you work closely with the filmmaker and the cinematographers?
No, I actually met Charlie Ahern through the Cold Crush Brothers, who was, I met him during the filming. Before the filming, the rehearsals for the filming of, Wild Styles. And Charlie and Fat Five Freddy used to come uptown and, go to these shows. And Charlie, phenomenal photographer in his own rights, besides a filmmaker, started doing this film called Wild Styles. And I, at the behest of the Cold Crush, got invited to the Dixie Club that night while they were filming. And I have pictures of, their performance during the film. And if you look in my picture, you can see the cinematographer holding this huge ass camera to make the film. And I have pictures of the Cold Crush signing their contract with Charlie Ahern. I have pictures of Martha Cooper taking pictures of the Cold Crush or taking pictures during the film. So, it was a fun time.
Do you remember where the Dixie Club was? Charlie Ahern told me it was like right at the top of the hill of like Freeman Street. If you're going
around the corner from the Bronx Music Heritage.
Yeah, just right up the hill, right? Like there.
Right up the hill, yeah.
So, and actually, I have a couple more images, so a few more images, and the next images are in your book, but they're not your photos. But I just wanted to ask you.
So let me just show this real quick, since Elena, unfortunately, you couldn't get those shot. But here's the Cold Crush Brothers at the Dixie Club.
Yeah.
Right there.
There's a lot of people can find images in this book. This is near the end of the book. This photo, the Dixie Club was actually the Jamaica Club, right, or the Jamaica Club or something. I think it was called, and they was named the Dixie Club in the film. And then you could see, there's during this there's a scene when people go in the club and you can see everyone hanging out in the club and the Cold Crush is performing. Thank you, Bobby. So the next images are a few that are from the book, not yours. But I wanted to ask you because I'm very interested in these places in the Bronx where things happened. And this next one is the Black Door, right? That was supposed to be with the Black Door was supposedly Flash did a lot of his gigs when he kind of like left the schoolyards and stuff.
So yeah, so when we did the book, there's only like 5 or 6 color images, photographs. The rest are black and white. So those 5 or 6 color images, photos, belong to Charlie Ahern. And Charlie, great supporter of my work and me of his, allowed us to use this. And this is the one of the Black Door, which is home base to Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five at the
Where
time.
was that? Where exactly was it?
Off the top of my head, I probably in the East Tremont section around there.
So I'm going to ask you the couple that come next. So these are flyers. Again, we were talking about this this like do-it-yourself culture that was part of that era. And there's a bunch of the flyers that are in the book, so you can see the places where a lot of these musicians performed. And this place, Joe, I'm sorry.
You have to imagine a world without an internet, and that's kind of hard for people today. I mean, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary, 20th year of 9/11, and there's actually kids that are 20 years old that weren't even born when 9/11 happened. So again, this is a time before the internet where you had to get the word out that you were doing a jam. You had to get the word out. So you had these flyer makers, so to speak, artists, and Buddy Esquire, who worked closely with the Cold Crush Brother in Phase 2 with Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, who would do these flyers and we'd make them. We'd break into the mimeograph room at school, and we didn't have Xerox machines back then. It was all done mimeograph, and make these flyers and pass them out at high schools, at schools, announcing the next jam, whether it was at a school or a PAL or outdoors, and this is one of the flyers.
Talk about guerrilla marketing. I mean, and it's so hip that they, in the case of this flyer, you see the exact date, February 7th, 1981.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think they're incredible. They have artwork, they have all the information. And you said there's a couple people, like when people think of like the psychedelic 1960s scene in San Francisco, there were a few artists that did all these great posters that are like famous now. Was it the same thing? Were there like a lot of the same guys doing these flyers?
I mean, everybody was doing flyers at the time, but you had a handful of flyer makers, flyer kings, king of flyers that were go-to artists at the time, and Buddy Esquire was one of them, and Phase 2 was one of them, and Buddy used to use my images, my photographs on the flyers, which was so cool. And that was at the calling of the Cold Crush Brothers.
Great. And where's the third place? It says 3408 Boston Road. Where is
Boston Road.
Where Boston Road and what? Do you remember like kind of where?
Off the top of my head, probably up north, Boston Road up there.
Way up there, okay.
Yeah, 10460, some 10467.
Oh, 69. Yeah, that's probably way up there.
Yeah.
And the third place, was it a club or a ballroom?
Probably a club. Stardust Ballroom up here also.
That was way up there, right? The Stardust. That was way up there.
Road. Another phenomenal place that we got into to perform. But these clubs were basically adult clubs, and you had to bang on the door to get us to do shows there.
And I like this one. It's not really a flyer for an event, but it's this record store, and you kind of just see the there was a West Indian connection to hip hop and everything too. That was part of that, the influence in that.
There's that ubiquitous word, disco, still floating around.
Of course.
At that time. The transition was starting to happen.
Of course.
And then there's this one, and this is on 825 Prospect Avenue. Oh, in 169th Street, right over there. Okay, so right up. That's right. Not too far from the BMHC either.
This is probably a community center that they got to use that night to announce their shows. And look, it cost $1 to get in, $3. And if you're a membership, it costs $1. And
And the
it's
guy couldn't
about
spell. The guy, as you noticed, could not spell sneakers correctly. You know.
but you gotta understand something. That time it wasn't about record deals or gold or anything. It was about next Friday, next Saturday, the next performance, the next battle. It was about bragging rights.
So, so one thing I'm going to say, there's a couple of questions in the thread, which I'm going to get to. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, which I had another image I had, but I lost in transition, was some women. There was a show. There was some women from the audience who was one of the guys was rapping too, and the book, this era of hip hop is very male dominated. There's not that many pictures of women. I mean, there was a few women, Sha Rock. There was a few women like in the scene. But can you maybe talk about that, like the women in the
Again,
scene?
male dominant, but handful of women on the scene: Sha Rock, MC Debbie Deb, Roxanne Shante a few years later. But Mercedes Ladies,
Mm-hmm.
it was just they were doing their thing too. And we all supported each other, so to speak. DJ Pambada, who followed in the Africa Bambaataa regime. So I mean, one thing about these flyers, it shows the history of everybody that participated in the birth of this culture, and it was black and brown and white and Asians and it was a little bit of everything. Hip hop is the face of hip hop are the African Americans, but us Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Latinos, and everybody at that time contributed to the birth of this culture.
So, Joe, one of the questions from someone from Berta Hotar, she goes, could you discuss the economy of the scene? How do they make money to pay for their expensive, fashionable shoes?
So
I can tell you about that.
So, and Bobby, you can relate to this. So, if the Cold Crush Brothers got $300 to do a gig that night, that got divided up 6 ways. Plus, you had to pay the driver. Plus, you had to pay the photographer. So, a lot of people didn't get paid those nights. You know what I mean? But it wasn't really about the money. It was about the love and passion for what they were doing. And Kaz would say it so eloquently. It's about bragging rights. It was about looking good and doing what you do best, knowing that somewhere down the road that big check will come, or, that money will come. But a lot of those nights were just a couple $100 gigs, and again, divide that by 6, 7, 8, you're lucky if you went home with 30, 40, $50.
And and believe it or not, you were probably making more than the salsa musicians at the time. I remember when I remember when Tito Puente was paying for just one gig $25, but they would make it up because they would do 13 gigs in 1 week, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, so the Cold Crush would probably do 2, 3 gigs in a weekend. Depending on the time and the weather and what was going on and stuff. But it wasn't really about the money.
And people have to understand too, things were cheaper back then.
Oh, a whole lot cheaper.
You could get gas for 25 cents a gallon. Yeah. You could get a pair of Converse.
But you would work
for less than $10.
You would work that summer job. Like that. Yeah. You would work that summer job, that summer, after school job, save up your money after you gave mom $20, $30 from your check, and save up money to buy a pair, brand new pair of Adidas and a pair of Lee jeans, and put the permanent crease in them. Pay the tailor $1 to put that sewn in crease in your jeans, and that would be your outfit for that weekend, and you'd recycle it next weekend.
Here's an example from your book of women in the culture, Battle of the Sexes, This
There you
band.
go. 1979. Yeah.
There you go.
Who's performing? Who is
You
performing?
have who is it? The Fly Girls Crew, Paula, Kim, Sharon, and Shelly, Willie D, Sweet Ebony, uh, and this was at the in Brooklyn at the New Zoo
There you go.
on Atlantic Avenue. It says here 15,000 watts of lights and colors.
Can't ask for anything more than that.
Joe,
And another act, there was another rapper, DJ Spinderella. That was
Okay.
and you win a turkey because it was
There
on
you go.
Thanksgiving. It was on Thanksgiving. Cross promotion. There you go. Yeah.
are any of those women groups still around, Joe? I mean, I know the Mercedes or ladies are around, Sharrock. But are any of those other women that performed around? Because I know we were always looking for women to interview for like Mambo to Hip Hop and stuff, and I would have been great to know about some of these women. But are they still?
I mean, they're still around. You just have to like know who to contact and to find them. You know, the Cortona Park Jams, Tools of War Park Jams. You know, you would see, MC Debbie Deb walk by, or Roxanne Shante would show up, or Lisa Lee, and so they're all still around.
So waiting, if anyone, last call, if anyone has questions for Joe, while we have him here live, you can ask him right here and put your question in the Facebook thread. And Joe, if anyone else has a question, I want to know, people I guess can buy this book like in regular way, like how they might go like to Amazon or other sort of like online areas to buy the book.
So the reason why we put this re-released this book was because it was such in demand. Again, it was released in 2007, and here we are in 2020, re-releasing the expanded version. And shout out to 1X Run, who led the charge, and Beyond the Street and Rock the Bells, LL Cool J, who did the introduction to the expanded version, and everybody that participated in the first edition who came on board in doing the re-release of it. And it's just reintroducing this book to a new group of a new audience today, because the first edition is such a hard book to find. If you do find one on eBay, you're gonna end up spending close to $700-800 for it.
Oh my God, really?
But we did this expanded version, and you can go to 1xrun.com and pick up the expanded version and add it to your library. Again, it's not your typical photography book, even though the abundance of the book is photography, but it deals with the culture as a whole, from the MC's perspective, from the writer's perspective, the DJ's perspective, the dancers, the B-boys, B-girls, and from the culture, the movement at the time. That's why Johan put my grandmother's words in the beginning of the book, because just to give the audience of what was going on in the Bronx at that time. It was a rough time. But, as we say in Spanish, no hay mal que por bien no venga. There isn't any bad that happened that good doesn't come out of it. And one of the good things that came out of that tumultuous time in the Bronx of fires and urban decay was the birth of hip hop.
Here's talking about what was happening at the time. Here's a fascinating photo.
Yeah, Third Avenue.
Couple dancing salsa or mambo.
There you go.
And it was happening simultaneously while hip hop was in its early days. So a lot of times people talk about, well, the youth abandoning our Latin music, etc., but it was still alive, and it was rocking the house, and of course, young people were still dancing to it. And these
right.
people that you see here probably. The dancing salsa right there as you documented them, and then they go to a club to see some b-boys rap, break dance, etc. So it's that dichotomy that was happening at at the time that you documented so beautifully. I mean, this book is amazing. It has,
Thank you.
it's not just photos. There's sections in this book that have quotes from famous uh, quotes of famous lyrics from cuts from that era. Here's an interesting thing that I found. Uh, some tracks played by Charlie Chase in the way back when some of the things that he would play on his playlist. Mecco, Star Wars, DC LaRue, Indiscreet, Creative Source, Who Is He and What Is He to You? Manzel, Space Funk, East Side Connection.
But those were all the influences that Charlie Chase had at that time.
Earth,
You
Wind
know,
and
Charlie.
Fire, Africano, yeah. It's great. And
You
here's
know,
the list of some 10 great live jams and battles. Just amazing documentation here. Anybody that's interested in the culture, the history, etc. Was
thank
that
you,
you?
Bob.
Was that you that said, "Hey, we should put that in there"? Or
No, again, it was Johan that did the format of this book, and again, if you look at the cover, it's a visual record of the early days of hip hop. So it's not, again, hip hop is, you have to include everything.
right?
So it's not just the musical part of it. It's the information that came with it. I mean, it's more than just music. It's a culture.
I'm curious. When was the first time you went to Europe and you realized the global aspect of how this
So I the first time
affected everyone?
I got to go to Europe was actually Japan, and that was an exhibition that Johan and I Johan put together called "Born in the Bronx" that traveled the world. And one of the places was Shibuya, Japan, that myself, Charlie Chase, and Tony Tone got to go to, and it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. We had tried to do an exhibition here in the city, and everybody was like, it's been done before. But Johan's like, this is Joe Conzo. So we went overseas, went to a couple of continents. And next thing you know, everybody in New York City wanted a Joe Conzo exhibition. And we were like, you got to wait now. We're going back overseas. But again, kudos to Johan Kugelberg, who put everything together and is known within the circles as a historian of punk music and hip hop music and Latin music also.
Great. Now, there's another side to your life as an EMT worker. Tell us a little bit about that side of your life, because I find it fascinating.
So I needed to get a job, so to speak. Photography was not paying the bills. I had went to School of Visual Arts for a couple of years and had to drop out, couldn't afford the tuition, and had some personal demons that I dealt with at the time. And I joined the Army and got into the medical field. I was a combat medic in the Army. And when I got out the Army, I joined the Health and Hospitals Corporation as an EMT with the Emergency Medical Service, EMS. And it became a career. It became a career where, I was on an ambulance doing a million, the entire service out of the 5 boroughs, we do 1.1 calls, 911 calls a year. And basically, we were responsible for pre-hospital care. So when you called 911 and got an ambulance, you got either 2 EMTs or 2 paramedics that basically saved your life and then stabilized you and brought you to the hospital. So that was my career for 27 years, and I've been retired for 3 years now.
Amazing. But you also became head of the union, I believe, right?
So I became, I guess that because it's in my blood, so to speak, activism, community activism. I had got involved in my union and started out as a delegate and worked my way up and became vice president of my union, which represented 4,000 EMTs and paramedics throughout New York City. And, instead of working on an ambulance, I'd wear a suit and tie and go yell at the mayor or the city council when for better working conditions or a contract.
Now, one of
Wait,
your
excuse me, Bobby. Can I just jump in? There's a question.
Right.
We do have a question from a viewer, and it just harkens back to like something Joe was talking about. That Joe, you met all these guys like in high school, in school, which is really amazing. You were all young, you were kids, you were teenagers, and you started this form of music. The Bronx is burning down around the society. It's burning down around everyone. But young people, though they can't get access to music in the schools, though there's no clubs to play anymore, they create something, and they create music. They're going to find a way to do it in schoolyards, in parks, whatever. So, when you talk about, and then it's gone global, which is amazing. This thing that started out of this like devastation, tragedy for a community just as went global. So Jorge Vasquez has a question. He remembers seeing hip hop parties in abandoned buildings throughout the Bronx. So again, there's abandoned buildings. The Bronx is burning down. A lot of your images show photos of, in all these different clubs. Did you ever go to that scene and take photos of like, in the abandoned buildings and young people?
Not that much, but I remember going to those abandoned buildings and hanging out and partying also. So, again, we made do with what we had. So if abandoned building was the place to show up that night to hang out, then it was. We'd clean it up and, run an electrical cord out to the lamppost out in the sidewalk or something like that to get some electricity. But, we made the best of what we had, whether, an abandoned building, schoolyard, school, whatever. You're muted, Bobby.
Fascinating thing about your service in the EMT service, the rock icon David Lee Roth from Van Halen.
Oh, don't go there, David. Don't go there.
That's our next show. That's our next show.
Wait. But is this actually true that he worked as an EMT worker in New York City?
That was later on when his career was, and actually right here in the Bronx. I think it was more of a publicity stunt and stuff. But yeah, it is true.
We'll get him for a rock. We're going to do rock music in the Bronx, and we'll do the show.
Obviously, he had to go through the training and everything. And did you ever work alongside of him on a bus, what they call a bus?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Well, I'll tell you who was an EMT that you probably never knew this, who worked for the city. Frankie Figueroa. Tito Puente's singer.
The singer?
Yep.
For those of you who don't know, Frankie Figueroa worked for Tito Puente for many, many years as his vocalist. And he used to have a thing about him that when he would sing, he would box on the mic, so, and he was very funny too, because he was just a prankster and just had an incredibly gifted sense of humor. Sometimes he changed lyrics to songs and substitute things that were not very kosher, as we would say in New York, and people would be dancing and go, what did he just say what I thought he just said, things like that. So I can't believe he was an EMT, man. How long did he do that?
It was actually, it ended in the beginning of my career, but I knew Frankie through my father, and I found out a few years later after I started working for EMS that Frankie worked for EMS also.
Oh my God! Imagine if he would roll up, you call up, 911, and Frankie comes to the door, and he goes to help you, and you'd be going, what? Maybe I'm dead already, and I don't know it or something, But we all love Frankie. I think he's one of the vocalists in the world of salsa that never has gotten his just due. Fantastic vocalist. Yeah.
Well, Joe, we want to thank you. This has been really great. I think it's been great to hear you talk about all the photos in the book, and it's a great book, and just amazing photos of that era of the Bronx, that era of a music scene, documenting that music scene. One more time before you go, where can people purchase the book? Where's the best place people can purchase the book?
onexrun.com. They can purchase it there, and or on Amazon or any one of those places. But I get it directly from the source. I'm starting to see this book trickle out on eBay for a couple of $100 and
Wow.
stuff, and I'm like, no, you can still get it for a reasonable price and stuff. But I can't control that market, what people do after they purchase the book. So.
One last question, John. I have to ask you this: do you have a favorite picture that you've taken? A favorite photograph that you've taken?
Actually, I do, and it's not of hip hop. It's the picture I have that I call the gang, and it's a picture of Ray Barretto, Tito Puente, Charlie Palmieri, Joe Quijano,
At Bose.
at Bo's restaurant.
Right, yeah.
That's an amazing
And-
photo. That's an
Yeah, it
amazing
is.
photo.
And it's what is so sad is that the Johnny Pacheco's in it, and he was the last surviving person in that photo. And I actually have that photo with everybody's signature,
Wow.
except I got Dave Valentine signing for Joe Quijano, because Joe Quijano was Dave Valentine's godfather or something like that. And I got Ronnie Puente to sign for Tito Puente. But I have Ray's signature on it, and Eddie Palmieri signed for his brother Charlie. And I got Ray's signature on it, and I got Johnny Pacheco's signature on it. So that's my favorite photo from my archives.
Indeed, I've seen that photo. It's incredibly iconic. You could probably, I hate to say it, but you could probably find it on the internet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can
So-
find it on the internet.
you can check it out. And
People
Bo's
can get-
was a very famous restaurant that catered to the Latino community. Great food, and it was a favorite place for those guys to hang and reminisce and talk and laugh, etc., etc.
So we want to thank I think David Gonzalez was the one who dubbed you the man who took hip hop's baby photos, and we saw some of these photos of these young guys in when they were in school and starting out, the emerging hip hop scene. We want to thank Joe Conzo for talking with us tonight and taking the time to show us a little bit of that history, talk about that history. We want to thank Jorge Vasquez for always making all the technical stuff work for us. Shout out to Jorge and everyone. Go out to the website that Joe mentioned and buy the book and support the artists. Support artists all the time. So we'll be back. Come back to our Facebook page. We're doing a live streaming show of a part 2 of Garifuna drumming on Friday. So we hope you can come back and check that out on Friday night. So everyone, thanks so much. Have a great night.
Bye bye, everybody.
Be safe, everybody. Get vaccinated.